Farmers markets, I always say, the farmers markets will tell you what's in season because that's what's local and available in abundance. So that is really helpful when you're trying to figure out what to eat during what season. But let's backtrack a little because I first want to explain, what happens from an Ayurvedic perspective when we are going into spring. What happens is that we have this accumulation of kapha, which is earth and water. Okay. From the latter part of winter into spring, which is kapha season, which kind of makes sense, right? So there's this accumulation of water and earth in the physical body. It's also true around us in nature, right? The ground is starting to thaw from the cold. So, right, it's releasing water. The birds are, starting to chirp again. Animals are coming out of hibernation. Things are starting to grow and bud. Okay. So the earth is a primary element in the spring, in the latter part of winter and spring. So it's the same in us. And if we don't really, sort of shake off that heaviness of winter that has accumulated over winter, that's when we can start having symptoms, and we'll get into allergies and congestion and things like that. So it's really important to make sure that you think about what's happening in nature and connect that to the inner changes that are happening inside. It's that whole idea of the microcosm is also in the macrocosm, right? What's within is also without. And so again, if you have the earth and water elements predominating, then those qualities are also predominating, right? Which is heavy, stable, cool, moist. Those are some of the qualities, and you can feel those, right? You feel those at the end of winter. And so you want to get going. And so there's this idea of, letting go of what you don't need, right? In a way, the earth is doing that too. It's thawing out, it's letting go of things, right? Then you have the spring buds of things. But it's the same for us. We should let go of what's no longer needed and start to plant the seeds for what we want to have in our lives. So that's sort of a psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual sort of point of view. But it's also true for our bodies, right? So again, you want to shed your winter coat, just the way that nature does. Shake off the heaviness of winter and then add some spring into your step. I always find it so funny that we have these sayings in English that really describe so much of Ayurveda. It's always so interesting to me because, shake off the heaviness of winter and get some spring in your step is exactly what we're doing in Ayurveda. So that's a little bit about what's happening. I said a lot right now. Do you have any questions about
Yeah,
that?
no,
Sorry.
I have such thoughts, and like because one is I feel this, like I feel this in my body so much right now.
Mhm.
And it's just subtle things, right? It's a shift in wardrobe. Like today was the first day I went for a walk on one of my calls, and I had my puffer, which is not my heaviest of winter jackets, but it's still one of my winter jackets on. And I started sweating, and I had like even brought a hat with me, like thinking that I
Mhm.
might be quite cold. And I was like, oh no, like I need to start shedding my winter coat, quite literally. I was doing that on my walk today.
Right.
The other thing that comes up for me is, I think there is a kind of a natural fluctuation that we who identify as female bodied like go through, and I think, all bodies go through this to some degree, but we go through a cycle throughout the month where we gain and
Yes.
lose water, right? And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
I also feel like myself, and I'm sure a lot of people can identify this, we gain a little bit during the winter, because,
Exactly.
we like to blame the holidays or things like that. And
Mhm.
you and I both know that there is this huge push that we feel out of alignment with it in January, all of a sudden to lose, those holiday pounds or whatever it is, or the water
Mhm.
weight. And also, I see it in the business world, and I'm going to rabbit hole for a second, but go here with me. There's
Yeah.
also a huge emphasis that we see in the business world to start the year strong, kick off the
Right.
new thing, dive in and get going in a way that totally feels out of alignment for me. And
Mhm.
so like in the last couple of years, I've started to really shift away from that and like not do any super heavy hard workout stuff during the winter season unless it feels really alignment, but I focus on like warmth and my yoga practice
Mhm.
and getting into warm studios. I also in my business have stopped trying to launch things in January because
Right.
it doesn't feel right and it doesn't feel good.
Mhm.
And so it's
Mhm.
just really interesting to me because as soon as you said, now is the time for like planting seeds that are going to bloom, I'm like, yes, that feels in
Right.
alignment, but that's not the way a lot of our culture operates. So can you
Right.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And, actually, 2 episodes ago, we'll link it in the show notes. The Meet Sethi, Dr. Sethi and I talked about this when we were talking about habits, and this came up, this idea of wintering. And it's exactly that. Again, we're following nature. In the winter, all of nature hibernates. We go within, right? There's nothing growing, everything's kind of dormant. We need to do the same thing. And that's exactly what I think you're speaking to, right? And we
Mm,
also, as humans, we keep a little bit of weight and we accumulate a little bit of water and because we're trying to stay warm also, right?
mhm,
We're going in. And so it's exactly that. So as nature shifts from that hibernation dormant stage into spring, when there's a little bit more light, right? When the days are a little bit longer, right? And the weather is changing. It's becoming a little less cold, a little bit warmer. It can be a little moist, right? So again, you start to feel a little bit like, okay, I want to get going now. Somewhere in
mhm,
March, April, we all start to feel like, okay, it's time to come out of hibernation. So it's exactly what you're talking about. That's
mhm,
exactly what it is. And so if you think about that, you can also remember then, oh, this is the time when that earth and that water has accumulated. Now I need to kind of get rid of some of that excess. So what can I do
mm,
in the practices that I'm doing every day, the routines I'm doing, the kinds of, exercise that I'm doing, the kinds of foods that I'm doing that will help me release that extra earth and water from my body.